Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin.
Beneath our feet, where the light fades and silence thickens, something ancient stirs in the soil. It is not the rustle of worms or the stretch of roots alone, but the breath of the earth itself, slow, steady, and filled with memory. If you could listen close enough, if you could quiet your thoughts like fallen leaves, you might hear it, the soft rhythm of carbon moving, exhaling from dark pockets of decay, inhaling through fibrous fingers of root and fungi. This breath has never ceased, not for a single moment in millions of years. It is older than the trees that now cast shadows, older than the hills that cradle them. It is a breath that has outlived empires, drifted through extinction, and whispered its way into seeds. Carbon, the element of life, begins a journey here in the dark loam where once living things lie in gentle surrender. Fallen leaves curl inward like sleeping hands. A beetle long gone returns as dust. A piece of ancient wood sighs into its smallest parts, all of it becoming food, then molecule, then invisible breath. It is here the cycle begins, not in the grandeur of stars, but in the hushed crumble of soil. Bacteria awaken, microscopic and tireless, breaking down what once stood tall. In that process, carbon is released, some into the air, some into water, some drawn into the waiting mouths of roots. Roots that feel, reach, and taste. Roots that speak in chemical sighs to fungi and neighbors. Roots that remember. Imagine an old oak, its trunk thick with time. Beneath it, a maze of roots weaves a quiet net through the soil, and at every junction, carbon passes like a whispered message. The tree pulls it in through photosynthesis, transforming sunlight and air into sugar. Some of that sugar feeds the tree, but some is sent down into the dark to nourish the hidden world below, the fungal threads, the microbial swarms, the companions unseen. This is generosity older than kindness. This is how trees feed the earth that fed them first. And in doing so, they capture carbon and store it, wrapping it in wood and leaf and root. Sometimes for years, sometimes for centuries. The soil remembers these exchanges. In peat bogs and marshy beds, in the hearts of forests untouched, the breath of carbon is stored like old dreams. Some of it drifts upward into the air we breathe, soft and ancient. Some is locked away in layers of clay, deep and unreachable. And some travels again into worms and beetles, into mushrooms and grasses, into the mouths of grazing deer. Each breath recycled, each step a return. We walk upon this slow exhalation every day. Our footsteps press down on the quiet work of decay and transformation. And yet we rarely notice the vast city beneath us. A city without buildings but full of movement. Without roads but full of traffic. A city where every tiny inhabitant plays a role in moving carbon from death to life, from darkness to air, from the past to now. Even the rain joins this slow ballet. When it falls gently on the soil, it carries dissolved carbon with it, washing through the cracks, seeping into aquifers, joining rivers, eventually reaching the sea. Along the way, it feeds roots again, triggers seeds to sprout, cools the earth, and nourishes breath. Carbon becomes a traveler, moving not only through life but through form and phase. Solid bark, soft breath, flowing water. Always changing, yet always itself. Somewhere beneath a field where children run, a patch of soil holds carbon that once drifted from a volcanic breath 10,000 years ago. Somewhere under a quiet forest, the remains of a bird nourish a sapling that will one day stretch into the sky. The carbon in your breath may once have danced in the leaf of a fern that swayed when mammoths walked past. Time folds here, under the surface. And in that folding, carbon keeps its promise, to return, to transform, to continue. Let us lie for a moment in the hush of that soil. Let us feel its slow warmth, its busy silence. There is no rush here, only the patient work of life reassembling itself. The earth breathes from beneath, and in that breath everything is touched, the trees, the oceans, the animals, and even the stars. For carbon, born in the heart of distant suns, found its way to earth, and now moves like a quiet tide beneath our feet. This is not the end of the story, but the first inhalation, the beginning of the breath beneath the soil, where roots dream and carbon waits to rise again. Let's drift deeper now, into the intricate threads that bind carbon not only to soil and root, but to memory, to time, and to the breath of every living thing. Imagine the Earth not as a planet of rock and water, but as a great storyteller, one that speaks through cycles, through layers, through the slow turning of seasons and the quiet spirals of decay. The story it tells is carbon's journey, told without words, without pause, and with infinite patience. It is told in the way a fallen pine needle becomes part of a fox's fur, or in the way a whale exhales carbon gathered from the depths of ancient fish. Carbon does not hurry, but it never truly stops. Once it enters the body of a plant, it begins a soft climb from air to leaf, from leaf to stem, from stem to fruit, from fruit to fur, and from fur to the earth once more. A single carbon atom might pass through hundreds of living beings before settling again in soil. This journey connects every life to every other. It means the breath you just released into the air might become part of a maple leaf next spring. It means that in some delicate, invisible way, we all share the same breath, not just with one another, but with forests, oceans, birds, and even the ancient creatures buried deep in stone. The carbon in your bones may have once glided through the gills of a trilobite. The carbon in a raven's wing may have belonged to a fern that drank rain beneath a dinosaur's shadow. We are made from pieces of the past, stitched together by the present and passing slowly into the future. And all the while, carbon remembers. It remembers the warmth of breath, the shape of leaves, the pressure of rock. It keeps no journal, and yet its trail is everywhere, in the rings of trees, in the sweetness of fruit, in the softness of moss beneath our feet. Forests are among the greatest keepers of this carbon memory. With every leaf that opens to the sun, a forest inhales. With every fallen twig, it exhales again into the earth. In tropical jungles and boreal woods, in wetlands and alpine groves, this quiet transaction repeats endlessly. Trees grow tall not only from water and sunlight, but from the slow gathering of carbon drawn from sky, locked in bark, stored in roots. And when those trees fall, the carbon is gently released, taken up again by mushrooms, insects, and the fertile loam. Yet carbon does not only travel through living things. It seeps into stone, lodges in the shells of plankton, drifts to the ocean floor, and becomes sediment. Over time, thousands, even millions of years, it becomes limestone, coal, oil. These are carbon's ancient dreams, laid down when the earth was young, sealed in pressure and time. They rest in the deep places of the world where no roots reach, where sunlight never stirs. And though these stores are often silent, they are still part of the story, vast archives of breath and life, waiting beneath our feet. But not all of this story is peaceful. When forests burn, when peatlands are drained, when ancient stores are disturbed, carbon is released suddenly, like a forgotten memory shouted into the sky. These moments ripple outward. The air grows warmer, the oceans rise, the balance shifts. The carbon that once moved slowly, gently, is now pushed too quickly, too far. It's as if the earth's lullaby has been interrupted and the rhythm of breath has become a gasp. Still, the earth remembers how to repair. In the cool depths of undisturbed soil, in the calm of a rewilded meadow, in the reawakening of kelp forests and prairie roots, the old cycle begins again. Slowly, surely, it draws carbon inward, tucks it away in living tissue, and breathes more gently once more. Regeneration is not a miracle. It is a memory. A forest regrows not from invention, but from remembering its own shape, its own timing. The soil, too, remembers. And when left to rest, it begins the slow knitting of life and element, stitching carbon back into its quiet place. All the while, fungi play a role almost too subtle to see. Mycorrhizal networks, vast, invisible webs beneath the ground, help shuttle carbon from one tree to another. Like soft threads of thought, they pass sugars, signals, and breath from birch to fir, from elder to sapling. It is as if the forest itself is a brain, and carbon is part of its thinking, part of its dreaming. Trees that are dying may pass their final sugars to younger neighbors, leaving behind the carbon of a life lived long. In this way, death becomes a gift, a transfer of memory and light. Even the ocean, vast and ancient, whispers carbon stories. In its depths, plankton bloom, drawing carbon from the air into their tiny bodies. When they die, they drift downward like snow, settling into the abyss, storing breath for centuries. Coral reefs, built from the bones of tiny creatures, lock carbon into stone gardens beneath the waves. Kelp forests rise and fall with the tides, catching carbon and releasing it again like long, green lungs. Every ripple, every current carries part of the cycle. So we find ourselves always within it, never outside the story, never apart from the journey. We are breathers and growers, eaters and decayers. We are soil, leaf, and sky. Whether we burn fuel or plant seeds, whether we build with wood or lie beneath it one day, we are part of this same looping, quiet arc. And the carbon that we carry, that we exhale, that we give to the world, it carries us too. In the slow unfolding of this cycle, we can begin to understand not only how life persists, but how it remains connected. Carbon is not just an element. It is a tether, a thread, a story woven through tree rings, coral bones, and your own lungs. When we walk through a meadow or rest beneath a tree, we are walking through the pages of that story, reading it not with our eyes, but with ourselves. And the earth, patient and soft, continues to write. Now let the story settle like fallen leaves after the wind. Let the rhythm of carbon's journey bring us toward a quiet understanding not of ends, but of cycles that never close. In this final movement of the tale, we rest with the idea that nothing truly disappears. Everything changes shape, slows, ripens, softens, and begins again. Carbon is the breath between those changes. It moves not with haste but with purpose. In its passage, it carries whispers of forests, memories of oceans, and the warmth of countless lives. Consider a seed resting in the palm of your hand. Within it are carbon compounds shaped by sunlight, air, and soil. That seed holds not only the future of a plant, but the past of the planet, the invisible residue of ancient breaths, of forgotten leaves, of animals long returned to dust. If planted, the seed will open. Its root will stretch down into the darkness, seeking minerals, water, and warmth. It will find carbon in the soil, left behind by decay and given freely by other roots nearby. With light it will grow, and in growing it will continue the long, slow task of drawing carbon into form, into stem, leaf, and blossom. All around the world this quiet alchemy continues. In the tundra, lichen gathers carbon under thin skis. In mangrove forests, tangled roots hold it in the wet hush of mud. In savannas and deserts where rain is rare and life is spare, even a single sprig of grass performs this miracle. Nothing is too small. A moss-covered rock, a drifting kelp strand, the breath of a sleeping fox, all are part of the story. Each moment of stillness is balanced by motion. Each act of growth is answered by return. And when things fall, as all things must, the cycle deepens. A leaf loosens its grip and floats down. A tree, old and hollow, gives in to gravity and leans into the earth. A whale sinks to the bottom of the sea, where its body becomes reef and nourishment. Carbon returns with them, not in sorrow but in service. Not in ending but in continuation. Even in fire, where forests turn to ash and smoke, carbon does not vanish. It changes phase. It joins the air again, mingling with clouds, feeding the sky. And in time it will come down with the rain, settling into new soil, beginning again. There is peace in this rhythm. There is reassurance in the thought that we are not isolated, not fleeting, not forgotten. We are threads in a tapestry woven from breath and time. The carbon in your fingertips may one day cradle a flower. The carbon in your final exhale may ride the wind to a glacier or glide into the belly of a fish. You are not separate from the forest. You are not separate from the sea. You are part of the ongoing poem, spoken gently through molecules that never stop moving. Even our cities, made from stone and steel, carry whispers of this story. Concrete holds crushed shells, ancient coral, fossilized remains of lives long past. Wooden beams carry the carbon drawn from forests now vanished. The breath inside buildings, the warm air of rooms and voices, carries exhaled carbon from laughter, sighs, and sleep. Everywhere the invisible threads of carbon stretch. They do not ask to be noticed, but they shape everything we know. And so the question is not whether we belong to this cycle, we always have. The question is whether we notice it, whether we live in rhythm with it or push against it. The earth has always known how to balance. When left to itself, it creates harmony and silence. But when rushed, when stripped, when burdened too fast, the breath becomes strained. The balance sways. Yet even then the earth continues to try to cool, to regrow, to absorb, to heal. Slowly, softly. We can join that slowness. We can plant trees not just to grow, but to remember. We can let soils rest, let waters settle, let forests stretch once more. Every act of patience is an offering. Every moment of care is part of the restoration. When we compost, when we reforest, when we let the grass grow wild, we are writing ourselves gently back into the poem. We are saying, let this story continue. The roots we nourish today may not feed us, but they will feed someone. A bird, a worm, a child not yet born. The carbon we capture now may one day form the feather of an egret, the shell of a beetle, the petal of a wildflower. This is not only science. It is a quiet promise. It is a way of living in reverence with something larger, older, softer than ourselves. As you rest now, think of the soil beneath you, not as dirt but as a library of breath. Think of the trees not just as shade but as storytellers, pulling sky into their limbs and sending it back to the earth. Think of your breath in, out, and know it is shared. You are exhaling what the fern once breathed. You are inhaling what a mountain once held. And when the moon rises above the forest, casting silver light on roots and leaves, remember this. Even up there, carbon has traveled. It rode on the boots of astronauts, nestled in their breath, packed in the food that grew from Earth's soil. Even on the moon, our planet's story has been carried a few atoms at a time, soft and unseen. When roots reached the moon, it was not fiction. It was continuation. A reminder that no matter how far we go, we are always part of the same gentle cycle. And so the breath continues, quiet, endless, patient, from soil to sky, from you to me, from the past into the next soft beginning. Fire to most is an end, a sudden, brilliant undoing of form, a vanishing act written in smoke. But to a forest, fire is memory. It is not only destruction but transformation, a necessary breath taken in flame. The trees do not forget what burns. They hold it in their rings, in their seeds, in the shape of their bark. To walk through a scorched grove months after the blaze is to see life not erased but rewritten, slowly, quietly, with ash underfoot and hope on the wind. Imagine a pinecone that refuses to open unless kissed by fire. Inside, the seeds sleep for years, waiting for the heat that will crack the cone and spill them into soot-covered soil. It is not alarm that wakes them, but design. They have learned to trust the flame, to rely on it. Fire clears the thick underbrush, releases trapped nutrients, and opens the sky for sunlight to return. The forest, in some deep way, welcomes this cycle. It remembers. Even the trees that fall are not truly lost. Their carbon rises in smoke, climbs into the sky, swirls with wind, and travels miles away. Some of it lingers in clouds. Some of it drifts into the lungs of distant creatures. Some will fall back to earth in rain and settle into streams. The fire does not end the carbon story. It only shifts it, sending it into motion with a sudden breath. The soil, blackened and warm, becomes something new. It is not dead, it is waiting. Mycelium stir beneath the ash and insects awaken. The first green shoots push through the gray, soft but certain. They are not afraid of what came before. In fact, they rise because of it, because the fire has made space, because the fire has left behind a gift, one measured not in flames but in what comes next. Charcoal, that black and brittle remains of trees, does not vanish quickly. It lingers in the soil for centuries, locking away carbon in silence. This is how forests store the memory of fire, not only in scars and saplings, but in the black bones of what once stood tall. Charcoal is the forest's photo album. It speaks of blazes that came and went, of heat that swept through and passed. And in holding carbon tight, it prevents too much from returning to the air too fast. Even in its burn, the forest thinks ahead. There are trees that wear armor, thick bark that resists flame. Others shed lower branches so that fires cannot climb. Some drop seeds only after fire as if trusting nothing but ash to raise the next generation. These are not random traits. They are ancient decisions, shaped over time by the rhythms of lightning and drought. The forest is not passive. It is wise. It prepares for fire like we prepare for rain, not with fear, but with understanding. And so, in certain seasons, lightning splits the sky and fire walks the land. It crackles and roars, yes. It moves fast and eats wide. But beneath its trail, a different kind of motion begins, slower, gentler, quieter. Roots stir, buds swell, creatures return. The carbon from what burned is now part of something new. It moves into sprouts, into the fur of deer, into the wings of returning birds. This is how the forest continues, not by avoiding loss, but by weaving it into growth. The flame does not end the story. It only turns the page. And in the quiet that follows, 1,000 soft beginnings unfold. The forest, remembering, becomes again. Let us walk now through a forest not long after the fire has passed. The air is still, but rich with the scent of ash and renewal. Charred trunks rise like blackened pillars, yet from the base of their scars, small leaves unfurl. In the hush that follows the blaze, life begins again, slow and undeterred. This is the forest's quiet truth, that rebirth is stitched into the very fabric of its being. Even in the silence after fire, something ancient speaks. Beneath the surface, the soil begins to stir. The heat may have scorched the top layer, but deeper down, life survives. Seeds long dormant sense the change. They feel the warmth, the chemistry of ash, the widened canopy above. For them, this is not destruction, it is opportunity. Many of these seeds are part of a lineage shaped by fire, a legacy written over millennia. They have inherited the patience to wait for this very moment, to rise when the fire has passed and the sky has opened once more. And so carbon, once locked in the standing trees, begins a new cycle. Some of it lingers in the air, rising with smoke, swirling high into the clouds, journeying across continents. Some of it remains, embedded in the soil, bound into charcoal, slowly seeping into the roots of new life. The rest is taken in by the green shoots pushing upward, by mosses and ferns, by the tips of tiny trees that bend in the breeze. What was once tree and leaf now becomes leaf again. A return, a reshaping, never a loss. Insects are among the first to return. Beetles arrive, drawn by the warmth, the exposed wood, the promise of space. Birds follow. Woodpeckers thrive in this new openness, feeding on the feast left behind. Their calls echo through the trees, bouncing off black bark and softening the stillness. Small mammals, once hidden deep in burrows, emerge to explore this transformed landscape. And slowly, as seasons turn, the rhythm of life resumes. Yet the memory of the fire remains. You can feel it in the soil, warm, mineral-rich, smelling faintly of smoke and earth. You can see it in the patterns on the trunks, in the way the light slips differently through the opened canopy. The forest has changed, but it has not ended. In fact, many of the species now thriving are those that depend on this very kind of renewal. Fire-dependent ecosystems, chaparral, savanna, boreal woods, need this reset, this moment of pause and transformation. There is something almost tender in how the forest carries this duality. It holds both loss and growth in the same breath. It remembers what stood, even as it welcomes what arrives. In the rings of surviving trees, the scars of fire are recorded as darkened bands, not marks of pain, but of passage. Each one tells of a summer storm, a lightning strike, a drought, a wind. Each one adds to the tree's story, deepening its wisdom, anchoring its roots more firmly in time. Even the fungi beneath the soil remember. Mycorrhizal networks, those hidden threads that connect tree to tree, often survive the fire's heat. And when they do, they spring back quickly, linking new seedlings together, helping them share nutrients, guiding their growth. In this way, the old forest whispers to the new. It passes on the knowledge of where the richest soil lies, where the light falls longest, where water lingers after rain. The carbon shared through these threads is not random, it is relational. It moves where it is needed most. And as the forest grows, it begins to draw carbon back from the sky. Leaves open, drink the sunlight, and pull down breath from the air. The process begins again, photosynthesis spinning light into sugar, sugar into wood, wood into life. Bit by bit, the carbon released in fire returns to solid form. It is locked into trunks, layered into bark, hidden in root. What once drifted as smoke now stands again, tall and green. Over time, the memory of the fire fades from sight, though it never truly disappears. In a decade, the trees may once again cast deep shade. In 2 decades, the underbrush thickens, the birdsong returns. In 50 years, the forest may look untouched, but it remembers. The charcoal remains, silent in the soil. The oldest trees still carry their scars. The species that now thrive owe their presence to that moment of flame. The fire has become part of the forest's story, not as a villain, but as a sculptor, shaping form through absence. To understand this is to see fire not just as a force of ending, but as a force of rhythm. It joins the cycle of rain, of growth, of decay. It balances the accumulation of time. Where branches grow too dense, where debris thickens and light can no longer touch the floor, fire arrives to clear, to reset, to make space. And in doing so, it prevents something far worse, the suffocation of the forest under its own abundance. Indigenous communities have long known this truth. For thousands of years, they practiced controlled burns, small, deliberate fires set with care. These burns were not destruction, but renewal. They prevented massive wildfires by maintaining balance. They cleared land gently, allowed certain plants to flourish, kept animals moving. Fire, when respected, became a tool of harmony, a partner, not a threat. Today, as our climate shifts and wildfires grow more intense, we are reminded of what forests already know, that fire is neither good nor bad. It is simply part of the pattern. What matters is pace, scale, intention. When we suppress fire entirely, we build tension. When we forget how to live with it, we invite catastrophe. But when we listen to the land, to the trees, to the lessons written in ash, we begin to remember what the forest never forgot. This is not only about ecology. It is about time, resilience, and memory. It is about the capacity to hold change without fear, to embrace transformation not as loss but as movement. The forest teaches us that everything returns, that even the fiercest flame leaves room for soft renewal, that in the heart of ash, life waits with quiet patience, ready to begin again. Now let the forest grow silent again, not from fear but from peace. The fire is long gone and the canopy has thickened. Where once ash covered the ground like a memory in shadow, now ferns curl upward, soft and green. Young trees sway gently, their trunks still thin, their leaves catching dappled light. The forest has returned not as it was, but as it must become. This is the closing rhythm of fire's story, not an end, but a transformation that hums quietly beneath the roots. This reborn grove, every breath is filled with carbon pulled down from the air and woven into bark. The sun, once filtered through smoke, now filters through new leaves. Light becomes sugar. Sugar becomes growth. Growth becomes carbon wrapped in living form. A single tree here may carry the breath of 100 others before it, trees that stood before the fire, trees that once fell in silence. The carbon that drifted upward in smoke has come back down in rain, in roots, in the slow inhale of sprouting green. It has not been lost, it has only moved forward. Let yourself imagine one such tree, a tall, young redwood rising steadily year by year. Its base is surrounded by saplings and moss, its top just beginning to join the elder canopy. But its carbon, that began elsewhere. Perhaps in a fallen log that burned decades ago. Perhaps in the breath of a bird that flew through smoke. Perhaps in charcoal crumbling slowly into the soil below. All of it taken in now, drawn through root and leaf, reshaped into strength. And when this tree breathes, when it exhales oxygen into the air, it is returning the balance once again. The forest in this way becomes a quiet clock. Its growth is not rushed. Its change is not loud. But it measures time in rings, in shadows, in patterns of life that emerge only when viewed across decades. A fire that once swept through in a single day leaves echoes that last for centuries. And yet those echoes are not destruction. They are resilience. They are wisdom written in living form, wisdom that tells us how to begin again. Animals move gently through this space. Deer nibble at low branches. Owls nest in hollowed trunks. Insects dig through bark, turning wood into soil. Even the smallest creatures carry carbon forward. A single beetle feeding on decayed wood becomes part of a fox. The fox breathes, runs, lives, and one day returns to the earth. Every exchange carries the same atom, changing shape, changing story, but never ceasing. Carbon, patient and soft-spoken, moves through it all. We often think of fire as the end of life, but here in this forest we see it differently. Fire is a reshaping, a rare and necessary pause in the cycle. Without it, many species would not thrive. Without it, the carbon would remain too tightly held, locked in old forms, unable to nourish what comes next. The blaze releases it, returns it, reminds us that nothing stays forever. And that's not sorrow, that's the design. Even now, years later, a visitor might find a piece of charcoal underfoot. They might pick it up, feel its lightness, see the fine grain where wood once grew. That small piece is carbon held still, refusing to drift. It is the forest's quiet way of remembering. It is what helps balance the cycle, storing carbon where it cannot rise too quickly, holding memory in a form that lasts. In this way, the forest breathes not just through leaves, but through restraint, through stillness, through the black remains that soften the soil. Somewhere deeper in the woods, an elder tree still stands. It survived the fire. Its bark bears the scars, thick and furrowed, a story written in heat. It watched the flames come and go. It stood while the smoke curled around its crown. And now it watches the new trees rise, the ground brighten with moss, the creatures return. It is the keeper of memory. And in its rings it holds both before and after, proof that time is not a straight line but a spiral, always folding back on itself. The rain falls gently here. It seeps into the soil, into the roots, into the charcoal, into the bones of the forest. With it comes carbon from far away, from the sky, from distant fires, from breath exhaled on mountain tops. All of it returns here, drawn into the cycle once more. The forest receives it without judgment. It does not ask where the carbon came from, only what it can become next. In this, there is a lesson: to accept, to renew, to begin again. Humans, too, are part of this story. The fires we have feared, the forests we have forgotten, they are not separate from us. We breathe the same air. We share the same carbon. The more we understand the forest's memory, the more gently we might learn to live. Not by preventing change, but by respecting its rhythm. Not by fearing fire, but by listening to its message. Make space, let go, begin again. As the day softens into dusk and light turns golden between the trees, the forest settles. The fire is only a memory now, one held not in fear but in form, in charcoal, in green shoots, in the quiet peace that follows the burn. The carbon that once swirled upward in a blackened sky now rests in leaf, in branch, in soil. The forest does not forget, but neither does it cling. It carries memory like a song, one repeated softly through time, reshaped with every verse. This is how forests remember fire, with patience, with growth, with silence that hums beneath the surface. They do not rush the return. They do not resist the burn. They simply endure. And in that endurance, they teach us that even in loss, there is always something waiting to rise. That carbon, quiet and steady, continues its circle. And that life, once scattered in flame, always finds its way home. The ocean speaks in a voice too slow for ears, too vast for words. It whispers not with language but with motion, a rising tide, a drifting current, a stillness beneath the waves. And within every ripple, every dark blue fold, there is carbon moving, resting, remembering. The ocean is the planet's deepest breath, exhaling slowly into the sky, then drawing in again. When the wind brushes the water's surface, it carries with it carbon from the air above, beginning a long journey into the heart of the sea. At first it seems like magic, how invisible gases from the atmosphere slip into the water, vanish from sight, and become part of the ocean's story. But it is not magic. It is chemistry, constant and quiet. Carbon dioxide dissolves into the surface, where it meets salt and sunlight, temperature and tide. Some of it drifts downward, some is transformed, and some becomes part of life itself, taken in by phytoplankton, those tiny green specks that float where the light still reaches. These microscopic beings, no bigger than dust, are among Earth's greatest creators. They inhale carbon and breathe out oxygen, spinning sunlight into sustenance. In a single day, trillions of plankton rise and fall with the water. They follow the sun, clustering near the surface in daylight, then sinking again in the dark. This is the ocean's pulse, its hidden tide. And with every breath, every flicker of light turned into sugar, carbon is caught and stored not in vaults or barrels, but in living cells, in membranes, in the fragile frames of these drifting seeds of life. When they die, they fall slowly, a rain of dust from the surface to the depths, carrying carbon with them. This rain is not sudden. It is not seen, but it never stops. Day after day, a snowfall of tiny life descends into the ocean's dark. Some of it is eaten, caught again in the mouths of larger creatures, jellyfish, small fish, squid. Some of it reaches the seafloor where it becomes part of the sediment, resting in the silence for hundreds, even thousands of years. These layers of marine snow build up slowly, layer upon layer, fossilizing into stone, locking away carbon from the air. The ocean's depths hold more carbon than all the forests of the world combined. It is the planet's great archive, a memory that stretches back to the first breaths of life. But the ocean does not hoard. It gives back, too. As currents shift and swirl, deep waters rise in places, bringing with them carbon-rich nutrients. These upwellings feed coastal waters, make fish abundant, and invite seabirds to feast. And when storms churn the surface, some carbon escapes back to the air, a quiet exhale after the long pause below. Coral reefs are part of this rhythm. They build themselves from calcium and carbon, growing slowly, branching outward like underwater trees. Each coral polyp takes in carbon from the water, mixes it with minerals, and forms its hard skeleton. Reefs, though fragile, are among the longest-lasting carbon vaults, their structures enduring for centuries, even as the creatures that built them flicker in and out of being. And then there is the whale, vast and silent, moving through the water like a dream. Whales are more than majestic creatures. They are vessels of carbon, carrying it in every bone and breath. As they feed on fish and krill, they gather carbon. As they dive and rise, they stir the ocean, mixing the layers, helping plankton grow. And when they die, their bodies sink, taking with them a lifetime of carbon to rest on the seafloor. Even in death, they nourish. Even in silence, they change the cycle. The ocean has always done this. Long before ships sailed, before satellites watched, before people spoke of carbon footprints and climate change, the ocean whispered carbon into calm. It breathed in the excess and carried it deep. It buffered the air, softened the changes. But there are limits even to something so wide and old. Too much carbon too quickly and the balance begins to shift. The water grows more acidic, shells thin, coral bleaches, life pulls back. The whispers become harder to hear. And yet still the ocean moves. It does not stop. It adapts, responds, tries to hold what it can. Kelp forests sway with the tides, drawing in carbon through long green fronds. Seagrass meadows catch carbon in their roots, burying it in sediments that can hold it for centuries. These blue carbon ecosystems, mangroves, marshes, underwater forests, are small compared to the vast open sea, but they are powerful. Their work is intimate, patient, steady. They cradle carbon like a lullaby. To sit beside the sea is to sit beside the story of breath. The waves that touch your feet may carry molecules from a volcano, from a forest fire, from the breath of a child across the world. The carbon that sways beneath the water may have drifted for years, changing form, feeding life, then sinking again. This is not chaos. It is a rhythm, one that has held for ages, one that still holds for now. As the tide comes in and out, the ocean continues its soft accounting. It remembers not with pages but with flow. It measures not in numbers but in life. And every whisper of carbon that enters the water becomes part of something vast, a system that lives, breathes, remembers. The ocean does not forget. Let us drift now beneath the surface, deeper into the folds of the ocean's memory. Light fades with every meter until it becomes a faint shimmer above, like a distant sky remembered through water. Here in the twilight zone, the ocean holds more than darkness. It holds history. Carbon once breathed by trees, once spun into plankton, now floats down in slow descent. It is in these dim depths that the story of carbon slows, settles, and continues its silent journey. Every speck of marine snow, a plankton's shell, a fragment of algae, a whisper of waste, is a vessel of carbon. Together, these particles drift like soft confetti, layer upon layer, toward the deep ocean floor. This descent is one of the most important acts on Earth. It is slow and gentle, yet carries away vast amounts of carbon from the surface, sending it beyond the reach of wind and weather. This is how the ocean breathes out, not with speed, but with patience. As marine snow falls, it feeds the creatures who dwell in darkness. Strange jellyfish, transparent as breath, rise to meet it. Tiny worms, shrimp, and deep-sea fish open mouths to catch the rain of life. In these realms, food is rare, and every particle matters. The carbon once held in sunlight becomes nourishment for the hidden, and what is not eaten continues to fall lower, quieter, colder, until it touches the seabed and disappears into time. The ocean floor is a slow archive. Here, carbon settles and becomes part of sediment. It mixes with minerals, is compacted by pressure, and over centuries forms rocks that hold Earth's deep breath. These deposits are not just stone. They are fossil records, carbon-rich books written one grain at a time. They tell of ancient climates, long-lost species, and the rhythms of oceans that once touched different shores. In every layer, carbon rests, waiting, woven into the bones of the planet. But the ocean's memory is not static. Currents continue to swirl, vast rivers within the sea, driven by differences in temperature, salinity, and wind. These global conveyor belts, like the thermohaline circulation, move water across the globe, from pole to pole, from surface to abyss. Along the way, they carry carbon, both dissolved and organic, mixing it into the very breath of the world. This circulation is slow, taking centuries to complete a loop, but it is essential. It connects the Arctic to the tropics, the surface to the seafloor, the past to the present. In polar regions, cold water sinks heavy with salt, heavy with absorbed carbon. This process draws surface carbon downward, locking it into deep water masses that may not rise again for hundreds of years. In these depths, carbon waits, untouched by storms or heat. It is safe there, held gently by the quiet and the cold. This is the ocean's gift: to store what the sky cannot, to protect what the land releases, to balance what would otherwise overflow. And above, at the surface, life continues. Phytoplankton bloom with the seasons, forming vast green clouds visible from space. These blooms are moments of joy, feeding fish, birds, whales. They also capture vast amounts of carbon in a single breath of light. When the bloom ends, much of that carbon sinks. The balance remains. The whisper continues. But not all carbon is stored. The ocean, like lungs, must also exhale. In certain regions where deep water rises again, carbon-rich waters meet the air. Some of the stored carbon is released, not in panic but in rhythm. It joins the atmosphere, mingles with winds, drifts into forests, falls with rain. This give and take has shaped Earth's climate for millions of years. It has kept the planet within bounds, allowed life to flourish, and ensured no one part of the system carries too much alone. Yet today the balance is shifting. Human activities send more carbon into the atmosphere than the ocean can gently absorb. The water's taken what they can, but the price is rising acidity. When carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it forms carbonic acid. The pH drops, shells thin, coral growth slows. Creatures that once built homes from calcium now struggle. Tiny plankton, the base of the marine food web, begin to falter. The ocean is whispering louder now, not in anger but in concern. Still, the ocean does not stop trying. Along coastlines, blue carbon ecosystems continue their ancient work. Mangroves with their tangled roots trap sediment and carbon both. Their wood grows dense and slow, holding carbon for decades. Beneath them, peat-like soils build up, dark, rich, and deep. In seagrass meadows, blades sway with the tide, catching carbon particles and sending them downward into mud. Salt marshes flood and drain, storing carbon in quiet pulses. These habitats, though small in area, are among the most powerful carbon sinks on Earth. They are also fragile. Cleared for development, drained, polluted, their balance can be lost in a single generation. And when they are destroyed, the carbon they've stored for centuries is suddenly released. It rises not as whisper, but as gasp. What was once a sanctuary becomes a source. The cycle is reversed. The memory is burned. But there is hope. Restoration is possible. Mangroves can be replanted. Seagrass can regrow. Coral reefs can be helped to recover. When left alone, these systems remember how to heal. They do not forget their role. The carbon will return, drawn down once again, held in root and mud and reef. The ocean teaches us this truth, that repair is slow but not impossible, that the breath can be calmed again. And so we listen, to the tide, to the currents, to the soft pulse beneath the waves. Carbon is still moving, still transforming, still passing through the hands of light and the arms of water. The ocean continues to whisper, not always loudly, not always clearly, but always steadily. It tells us, I remember, I carry, I care, and I continue. Now let us settle into the ocean's final lullaby, where the story of carbon finds its gentlest rhythm. Here, in the hush of deep water and the calm beyond tides, the movement of carbon is not urgent. It is thoughtful. It circles without noise, without command, always returning, always becoming. The ocean, in its infinite breath, does not hurry to release what it has gathered. It cradles each molecule like memory, like time wrapped in blue. Imagine the Earth seen from space, a blue planet, pulsing with light and motion. The ocean covers more than two-thirds of that view, and beneath its shifting surface lies the heart of Earth's climate balance. Much of that balance depends not on vast storms or roaring waves, but on the slow choreography of carbon. It moves from wind to wave, from algae to fish, from breath to shell, from drift to rest. And even when it seems invisible, it is always there, part of every swell, every breeze above the sea. Somewhere a whale exhales. A plume of breath rises skyward, filled with warmth, with water, with the soft exhalation of stored carbon. That breath joins the air, drifting into cloud, perhaps crossing continents. Somewhere else a mangrove holds firm against the rising tide, its roots tangled with silt and stillness, trapping carbon in the layers of soft black mud below. And far beneath both, deep in the abyss, a slow sediment settles, plankton bones turn to stone, carbon hidden for centuries. This layering is not a burden, it is a gift. The ocean accepts carbon not to drown it, but to keep it until the world is ready again. It stores what we release too quickly. It buffers what would otherwise overwhelm. It speaks softly through its ecosystems, telling us when we have asked too much. A coral reef that fades is not just dying, it is telling. A kelp forest that thins is whispering a change. A fish that vanishes from the current leaves behind more than an absence, it leaves an imbalance. And yet always the ocean waits for restoration. It never closes the story. Even damaged reefs can bloom again. Even emptied bays can fill with life. Seagrass can regrow, kelp can reach for light, fish can return to once quiet waters. The carbon drawn back in becomes the beginning again. A new shell, a new leaf, a breath steadier than before. The ocean has never forgotten how to heal, it only asks for time, for care, for balance. The future of carbon lies not only in machines and models, but in mangroves and meadows, in tides and trust. When we speak of climate, of temperature, of change, we are speaking of breath, of the breath the ocean gives us, and the breath we return. Every action we take, every forest we protect, every waterway we restore becomes a verse in this long song. Not because we control it, but because we are inside it. We are not beside the ocean. We are part of it. Even the smallest act, protecting a patch of wetland, planting a mangrove, allowing a seagrass meadow to spread, becomes monumental in time. These places are not background. They are balance. And in their quiet, they do the heaviest lifting. They catch the carbon we cannot see. They lock it away, not with walls, but with roots. And they do it with grace. As the sun sets across a calm bay, the last golden light reflects from water still breathing. Carbon slips between air and sea unnoticed by most, but the ocean notices. It responds. It continues its ancient work, dissolving, absorbing, releasing, sheltering. And beneath the waves life stirs. Fish flash in shoals. Algae bloom. Whales sing to one another across vast distances. All of it held together by invisible threads, by cycles, by memory, by carbon moving endlessly. Let this bring comfort. That long after we sleep, the ocean will still breathe. It will still whisper carbon into coral, into tide, into the soft bones of the world. And every molecule we send, every breath we take becomes part of that vast library. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. The ocean holds it all, turning carbon not just into chemistry but into continuity. This is the lesson of the sea, that balance is not a finish line but a practice. That memory lives not only in minds but in water, in tide, in sediment and salt, and that the ocean, vast, patient, and alive, will continue to carry us if we let it, if we listen. So lie still now and hear the waves beyond sound. Let the ocean's breath wash over you like a cradle. Let the story of carbon rise and fall with the tide. For the ocean does not end. It does not forget. And even in silence it sings. Every morning when the sun rises and touches the trees, something ancient begins again, quiet, invisible but powerful. The leaves lift gently toward the light, opening themselves like soft green lungs. And as they do, they draw in the sky. They do not breathe like we do with chests and lungs, but they inhale nonetheless, pulling in carbon dioxide through tiny pores no wider than mist. This breath, taken without sound, feeds the world. It is the beginning of something miraculous. Each leaf, no matter how small, holds a network of veins more intricate than any city. These veins carry water from roots, drawn up through capillaries thinner than a thread. The water meets the air inside the leaf, where sunlight waits. And in that glowing meeting place, photosynthesis begins, the process by which light becomes life. The leaf takes carbon dioxide from the air and water from the soil, and with sunlight it spins them into sugar and oxygen. The sugar feeds the plant. The oxygen drifts into the breeze. It is a perfect exchange, repeated millions of times in every tree, every day. But it is not only sugar that is made, it is structure. The carbon captured from the air becomes part of the leaf, the stem, the branch. It becomes wood and bark, root and seed. The tree grows taller, wider, stronger, not by adding matter from the soil, but by weaving the air into form. Most of what a tree becomes, its trunk, its crown, its rings, comes from the sky. From carbon pulled in, one gentle breath at a time. Now imagine a forest, thick with leaves, each one a green machine pulling carbon from the air and storing it in silence. The forest becomes a sponge for the sky, a living net catching the breath of the world. Some of the carbon remains for years, some for centuries. In redwoods and oaks, in maples and pines, the sky is held in cellulose and lignin, in fibers that sway with the wind and bend toward the sun. Even fallen leaves continue the work. When they drop to the ground in autumn, they carry with them the carbon gathered in spring and summer. As they decompose, that carbon seeps into the soil, nourishing roots, feeding microbes, preparing the earth for the next generation of green. Nothing is wasted. Every leaf that falls becomes food, becomes memory, becomes breath again. And leaves do not work alone. They are part of a larger system, a conversation between tree, soil, and sky. The roots send up water and nutrients. The leaves send down sugars. The carbon flows both ways, shared with fungi, with neighboring plants, with creatures who nibble and nest. Even the air around a leaf changes as it breathes, cooling slightly, growing richer in oxygen, shaping the microclimate in ways too subtle to see. The trees, in turn, respond to the changing world. When carbon levels rise in the atmosphere, many trees grow faster, building more wood, stretching taller. It is as if they are trying to help, to pull more sky into their arms. But faster growth is not always stronger growth. The balance shifts. The rhythm can falter. Trees grown in haste may not live as long. The forest knows this and adjusts in time, but the adjustment takes generations. Leaves also speak through scent. When chewed by insects, many emit signals, tiny clouds of chemicals that drift to neighboring trees. These messages warn of danger, summon defenders, or prepare nearby leaves to change their chemistry. Some of these signals are carbon-based compounds, volatile and fleeting. They are part of the air we smell in forests, the green aroma of pine, the sweetness of crushed grass, the musky breath of moss, all of it born from carbon caught in light. And so, leaf by leaf, breath by breath, carbon moves from sky to cell. It becomes not only life but landscape. Forests shape the land not only through roots and canopy but through the invisible work of leaves. They cool the air. They shade the soil. They draw rain. Their collective breath changes the temperature, the moisture, the wind. They are architects of climate built from sunlight and air. Tropical forests, where leaves are broad and numerous, the carbon drawdown is immense. Every day, these ecosystems inhale vast amounts of carbon and release rich pulses of oxygen. The carbon is locked in vines, in understory plants, in trees so tall their crowns disappear into mist. Even the leaf litter is thick with captured air, decomposing slowly in the humid dark. In temperate forests where leaves fall each year, the rhythm is more seasonal but just as profound. Each spring is a new breath. Each autumn, a gentle exhale. Now think of a single tree, perhaps one in a city park or beside a country road. Its leaves shimmer in the breeze. Its bark holds the shape of years, and within it there is sky. The very carbon it holds was once drifting above your head, invisible and silent. Now it is part of something solid, rooted, growing. The tree does not speak of this. It does not boast, but it remembers. Its rings tell the story of every breath taken, every summer of growth, every winter of rest. This is what leaves do. They take the weightless, the unseen, and turn it into shelter, into shade, into strength. They build homes for birds, canopies for insects, pathways for squirrels. And all of it, down to the smallest fiber, comes from the sky. From carbon drawn in through pores smaller than a hair, spun into sugar by sunlight, woven into wood by time. And when the leaves fall and the tree sleeps, the story continues. For even then the breath remains in the soil, in the roots, in the promise of buds waiting to unfurl once more. The sky has been stored. The carbon has found a home, and the world quietly breathes again. Let us drift deeper now into the quiet work of leaves, into the soft mechanics of breath and the long patience of trees. What seems like stillness is a slow, tireless gathering of light, of water, of carbon drifting on the breeze. Every leaf, whether broad and sunlit or hidden in shadow, plays its part. Together they form a canopy that breathes not just for the forest, but for the world. A million small inhalations, taken every second, hold the balance of air. Inside each leaf, the carbon pulled from the sky is carefully rearranged. Atoms are stitched into sugars, forming long, invisible threads of energy. These sugars move downward, traveling through narrow tubes in the stem, down the trunk into the roots. The journey is quiet, constant, unhurried. The tree does not hoard this sweetness. It shares it with fungi that lace through the soil, with bacteria that live in root hairs, with insects that nibble at its edges. In return, the tree receives nitrogen, phosphorus, and minerals, elements pulled from rock and earth by its tiny underground companions. This exchange is ancient, older than language, older than mammals. It is the reason forests can grow so vast without ever needing to be fed from outside. The leaves gather from above. The roots trade below. The middle, the trunk, is the record, the long column of captured sky and deep soil memory. Each year adds a ring, a whisper of time. Each ring is a message in carbon, locked in lignin and cellulose, resistant to decay, strong enough to hold storms. And when trees fall, they do not vanish. They lie on the forest floor, slowly breaking down. Fungi bloom across their bark. Beetles dig tunnels. Moss drinks the dampness from their skin. The carbon inside them begins to return, some to the air through respiration and decay, some to the soil where it will feed the next sapling. The leaf that became wood becomes soil again. The breath that became branch becomes wind once more. Nothing is wasted. Carbon remembers every form it takes. In certain trees, carbon stays longer. In oaks and redwoods, in cedars and baobabs, carbon is stored for centuries, held tightly in thick trunks and deep roots. These trees are monuments of breath, holding carbon that entered the world long before anyone noticed. Their presence cools the air, shades the land, shelters life. But more than that, they serve as bridges across time, linking the carbon cycles of the past with the hopes of the future. Some leaves are shaped to gather light from the weakest angles. Others have waxy coatings to retain water or fine hairs that scatter sunlight. Some are so small they seem like green dust. Others stretch broad as hands, swaying gently in high canopies. But all of them perform the same sacred act. They take what is invisible and make it visible. They build form from breath. They create stillness from motion. And the carbon they gather is not theirs alone. It becomes the forest's body, its memory, its voice. When many trees grow together, something remarkable happens. The carbon held in each individual leaf is no longer isolated. Through their roots and their fungal partners, trees can share sugars, signals, and strength. Older trees often feed younger ones. A shaded sapling receives carbon from a sunlit elder. A sick tree is nourished by its neighbors. The forest behaves not as a collection of separate beings, but as a community, a carbon-sharing network that adapts, supports, and learns. This underground cooperation is invisible to us but vital to the world above. It is what makes forests resilient. It is how they survive drought, disease, and fire. The carbon that moves between trees carries more than energy, it carries information. A message passed in molecules: grow here, rest there, beware. Even the air above the canopy is influenced by this communication. Forests can cool the atmosphere, summon rain, even shape wind. Through carbon, they write upon the sky. And just as the forest is shaped by carbon, so too are we. The food we eat, the air we breathe, the warmth we feel, all depend on the carbon gathered by leaves. Without photosynthesis, the world would be still and silent. No breath, no motion, no voice. It is the leaves, humble and constant, that give the earth its rhythm. In cities where green space is rare, even a single tree can make a difference. Its leaves draw in exhaust and dust. They filter the air, soften the heat, offer calm. The carbon they gather is stored not only in their trunks but in the soil around them. A patch of grass, a rooftop garden, a line of trees along a road, all are places where the sky is gently drawn downward and made solid again. The work is the same, whether in forest or in street. The breath continues. Some of the carbon that passes through leaves today may end up in unexpected places. In the wood of a house, in the fabric of a cotton shirt, in a book held in a quiet room. These are temporary shelters. One day the carbon will move again. It always does. But while it rests, it carries the memory of sunlit afternoons, of green canopies, of wind stirring the tips of branches. This movement from sky to leaf to world is not just biology. It is poetry. It is the earth's slow exhale captured in form. And the leaves, delicate and determined, continue their task, one breath, one carbon atom, one season at a time. Now let the leaves fall. Let them drift slowly, silently from their branches, not as a sign of loss but of completion. Each one has done its work. It has gathered carbon from the sky, turned it into sugar, and shared it with trunk and root and soil. It has danced with sunlight and wind, cooled the air, shaded the ground. And now, as it floats downward, it carries with it a memory of that light, that air, that ancient breath. It joins the forest floor like a letter folded gently and placed into the hands of the earth. There on the ground it begins to change. Rain softens its skin. Microbes awaken. Fungi extend white threads like whispers, breaking the leaf into parts so small they vanish from sight. And in this quiet, hidden process, the carbon it once held returns, not in a rush, but in a release as patient as its gathering. Some rises back into the air. Some sinks deeper into the soil, where it may rest for years, held in humus, in root, in life yet to come. This is how the cycle completes, not with a flourish but with humility. The leaf does not cling. It gives itself back. It trusts the system that shaped it. And in doing so, it becomes part of something larger: the forest's breath, the soil's richness, the planet's balance. Its carbon flows into the next chapter of the story, perhaps into a mushroom, perhaps into a worm, perhaps into the roots of a sapling preparing to rise. Some carbon lingers longer. In cool forests where decay is slow, leaves pile in thick layers, building beds of future soil. In wetlands and peatlands where oxygen is scarce, the leaves decay even more slowly, trapping carbon for centuries, even millennia. These quiet places become time machines, holding the breath of past forests in dark layers of organic memory. A leaf that fell when the pyramids were young might still rest, only half decomposed, in the depth of a bog, its carbon still waiting. And then there is the fire, the return of flame to forest, the hot exhale of change. Leaves, twigs, branches gathered over seasons catch flame and release their carbon all at once. It rises in smoke, curls into the atmosphere, mixes with cloud and wind. It is not waste. It is not ruin. It is a re-entry into the sky, and from that sky the rain will fall again. Seeds will sprout. Leaves will grow. The cycle continues, fiery and green, quiet and bright. In a world now aware of imbalance, these leaf-bound stories carry great weight. Forests are not merely scenery. They are systems of storage, of sharing, of shaping the very climate we live within. Every tree, every canopy, every single leaf is a vessel of carbon not fixed but flowing. When we cut too many, burn too much, drain too deeply, the balance falters. The carbon that should stay stored is released. The rhythm of breath grows shallow. But when we plant, when we protect, when we allow forests to grow old, to grow wide, to grow wild, the balance begins to return. There is beauty in this resilience. A young tree grown from seed begins the work again without hesitation. Its first leaves are small but hungry for light. They begin the same ancient process, drawing carbon from the air, spinning sunlight into form. Within a single season, they add mass to the stem, strength to the root, life to the forest around them. Within a decade, they shade the ground. Within a lifetime, they may hold tons of carbon, tons of sky made solid. And though the work of one leaf seems tiny, the work of many is vast. In a healthy forest, billions of leaves work together, day after day, season after season. They do not rest. They do not compete. They share the light. They shape the air. They change the planet not with noise, not with machines, but with presence, with patience, with breath. Even in winter, when branches are bare and snow lies heavy on the land, the memory of leaves remains. The carbon they gathered is still there, in the wood, in the roots, in the soil sleeping beneath the frost. It waits for spring. It waits for the next inhale. And when that moment comes, when buds swell and burst into green again, the story resumes without pause. The sky is drawn downward once more and breath begins anew. There is something sacred in this, something gentle and sure, that the world is made not only from stars and oceans but from leaves, that the balance of air, the softness of shade, the depth of soil, all of it comes from these green pages that flutter above us. They ask for nothing. They demand no praise, but they give everything. So the next time you stand beneath a tree and feel the coolness of its shade, remember, you are standing in the work of breath. The carbon in your own body was once held by a leaf. It may have traveled through a flower, through a fruit, through a flame. It may have fallen in rain, but it was drawn first by a leaf, taken in with light, turned into form. You are part of that story now. You always have been. And as leaves rise again to meet the sun, the cycle continues. Carbon moves, breath flows. The sky is held once more gently, endlessly green. High in the mountains, where clouds drift like whispered thoughts and wind scrapes across jagged cliffs, stone sits in silence. It seems lifeless, unmoving, a relic of ancient fire and pressure. But hidden within its weight is a memory of breath. A story written not in green, not in leaf or trunk, but in mineral and dust. This is the quiet tale of carbon in stone, of how the sky was once caught, not by trees or oceans, but by rock. Long ago, before roots carved into soil and before forests breathed in harmony, the earth itself breathed through stone. Volcanic eruptions sent carbon into the air in great plumes, warming the planet, shaping its early weather. Over time, as rain fell and rivers flowed, that carbon began its journey downward. It dissolved into droplets, merged with minerals and flowed into valleys and basins where it met rock in patient chemistry. The carbon did not vanish. It bonded. It clung to calcium and magnesium, forming limestone, marble, and other silent archives beneath the crust. This process, weathering, is slow and constant. It begins with a single drop of rain, slightly acidic from carbon dioxide dissolved in the sky. The drop kisses the surface of a rock, begins to eat away at the mineral grains, and carries those tiny pieces into streams and seas. There, they settle, form layers, and over millennia harden into stone. Every slab of limestone holds in its veins carbon that once floated freely, warmed the air, touched the breath of creatures now long vanished. Some of these rocks form cliffs above the ocean, pale and towering. Others lie buried beneath fields, unnoticed, their surfaces unseen. But all of them carry carbon locked, solid, unmoving. They are Earth's deep breath held tight, and though they do not seem alive, they are part of life's balance. Without them, the planet would overflow with carbon. The skies would thicken. The warmth would rise beyond what life could bear. Stone, in its stillness, became a protector. Coral reefs, too, are made of stone built from the skeletons of countless marine creatures who took carbon from the water and used it to build homes. Each coral polyp gathers calcium and carbonate, forming a tiny cup in which it lives. When it dies, the structure remains. And over generations, these remnants pile up, forming reefs that span miles, sheltering fish, buffering waves, and storing carbon with every wave that breaks. These are living stones built from breath, shaped by time. Even the shells of snails, of clams, of ancient ammonites buried in deep rock layers all carry this legacy. Carbon, drawn from sea and sky, turned into armor, into spiral, into stone. When we hold a seashell in our hand, we are holding a breath that once drifted through ocean air. When we touch a marble column, we are touching carbon that once floated above a prehistoric sea. Stone is not separate from the air. It is what happens when the air chooses to rest. And yet stone is not finished. Though it moves slowly, it still participates in the cycle. Tectonic plates shift. Mountains rise. Erosion begins again. Rocks are worn away by wind, by water, by lichen and frost. And as they wear down, they release small traces of carbon back into the world. A pebble, crumbling beside a river, might release carbon that has slept for tens of millions of years. That molecule may drift into the sky, join a cloud, fall as rain, and be taken up by a leaf. The stone's memory becomes the tree's breath. In certain places, carbon trapped in rock takes on another form: fossil fuels. Coal, oil, natural gas, all are ancient carbon, drawn from the bodies of plants and animals that lived, died, and were buried under pressure. Over eons, their stored carbon hardened into dark reservoirs. And now, when we burn them, we release that carbon all at once, a breath that took millions of years to bury, exhaled in moments. The stone no longer holds it. The sky does. This sudden release shifts the balance. The earth, which had learned to live with carbon moving slowly, now must absorb it faster than before. Oceans take more. Forests stretch higher. But even still, it becomes too much. And so we look again to stone, to the way it once held carbon, to the way it still might. Scientists study how crushed basalt might pull carbon from the air, how ancient weathering processes might be mimicked on modern scales. The stone may hold the answer it once carried without being asked. Yet even without our intervention, stone continues its quiet work. In mountain streams, in deep caves, in coral reefs and dusty cliffs, carbon is caught, held, and slowly transformed. No wind howls to announce it. No bird sings of it. But the balance is maintained, molecule by molecule, layer by layer. The breath of a million years rests beneath our feet, shaping the ground we walk upon. To understand this is to look at stone not as dead, but as resting. Not as cold, but as patient. Each boulder, each cliff, each grain of sand may be holding a breath that once swirled in clouds, once warmed a forest, once fed a plankton drifting in the sunlit sea. And when the time comes, that breath may rise again, to feed a tree, to shape a storm, to settle into rain. The stone remembers the sky. It always has. Let us follow the path of carbon as it moves deeper into stone, not just the visible cliffs or coral bones, but into the silent strata that lie beneath forests, fields, and sea. These layers of rock stretch through time like pages of a book too vast to hold in the hand. Each one holds a record of breath transformed, of sky turned to stone, of rain that became mineral, of life that curled and settled and pressed itself into permanence. This is not the motion of minutes, but of millennia. The stone writes slowly, but it writes everything. Imagine a river carving through a canyon. At its base, layers of rock are revealed, ribbons of limestone and shale, old as dinosaurs, older than birdsong. Within those layers lie fossils, pressed between sheets like dried flowers in a journal. A fern frond, its shape perfect in stone. A shell still curled. A fish caught mid-swim. Their bodies are gone, but their carbon remains locked into mineral, fused with pressure and time. They are no longer soft, no longer breathing, but they carry the shape of life. They are breath held still. Above ground, weathering continues its slow alchemy. Raindrops, infused with carbon dioxide from the sky, form weak acids that nibble at the rock. Grain by grain, atoms are loosened, minerals released. The carbon captured in these reactions is swept away by streams, carried to the ocean where it may become sediment or sink into the sea floor. This gentle process, repeated endlessly, balances the carbon we release through other means. It is nature's correction, a slow, quiet counterbalance to the haste of fire and fossil fuel. Over time, these flows of carbon create vast formations. Karst landscapes, riddled with caves and sinkholes, form as carbonic acid dissolves limestone. Stalactites and stalagmites grow in these hidden caverns, one drop at a time, as dissolved carbon and calcium are reassembled into shape. It is a process of removal and return, a breath exhaled and then sculpted into stone. What drips today may harden tomorrow. What hardens now may one day release again. Far below, tectonic forces continue the deeper motion. As Earth's crust folds and subducts, ancient layers of carbon-rich rock are pushed downward into heat and pressure. Some are melted, transformed, and return to the surface through volcanoes, the deep Earth's exhale. Each eruption carries with it carbon once caught in coral, in sediment, in the bones of long-gone trees. It rises as gas, joins the sky, and begins the journey again. Stone becomes sky. Sky becomes breath. Breath becomes life. This geological cycle, so slow we cannot witness its full arc, is essential. It is the Earth's foundation of balance. Without it, carbon would accumulate in the air or vanish too deeply below. But with it, a steady rhythm is maintained. A long inhale into stone, a long exhale through fire. It is not a loop we often see, but it is one we live within. Every step we take rests upon its story. Even the smallest pebble on a path may hold a memory of air. It may have formed in a reef, carried the shell of a snail, rolled down a hill for centuries. Its carbon is not gone. It is simply waiting. In the right conditions, pressure, water, warmth, it may again become part of the sky, or the root of a tree, or the spark in a fire. There is no permanence in carbon, only transformation. Stone is not the end, only a resting place. In human hands, stone has taken new forms. We carve it into monuments, grind it into cement, slice it into tiles. We build homes and temples from it, often without knowing the carbon we hold. A limestone wall may carry the breath of fish. A marble statue may hold the echo of ancient plankton. We build our lives from the memory of the sea. And when we break or burn these stones, we sometimes awaken what was long asleep. The carbon rises again, quiet no more. There is wisdom in letting stone be, in protecting the places where carbon sleeps, the cliffs, the caves, the reefs, and bedrock. In honoring the pace of geological breath, we learn patience. We learn humility. For all our speed and industry, we cannot outpace the earth. The carbon we bury takes centuries to settle. The balance we disturb takes centuries to restore. And yet there is possibility. Just as weathering removes carbon from the sky, we might help the process. Spreading crushed basalt over fields, for instance, mimics natural mineral weathering and draws down carbon. It is not a trick. It is a return to an ancient method the Earth has used since the beginning, one we are only just beginning to understand. In every mountain, every stone beneath our feet, carbon has found a home. It has rested, shifted, transformed. It has journeyed through pressure and fire, through reef and river. It has become monument and memory, sculpture and soil. And still it is not finished. The breath continues, patient and eternal, through the slow exhale of stone. Now let us rest with the stone, not to end the story, but to feel its full stillness. The wind no longer howls through the high cliffs. The rain has softened, and the sun casts long shadows across a rocky slope. Beneath our feet lies not just earth, but the memory of sky. Carbon, taken long ago from the air, sleeps here pressed into fossil, dissolved in mineral bonds, held in the tight clasp of limestone. It does not speak, but it remembers. And in that memory, the world is held together. In the quiet, stone reveals its slow wisdom. A cliff face bears the marks of ancient water. Shell imprints cover slabs now far from the sea. Ripple patterns, frozen in sandstone, trace where waves once danced. Each of these forms is a letter in a language of time, and every one of them holds carbon not lost, not wasted, but kept. This is not just the planet's crust. It is its long breath drawn in and held. We often think of stone as ending, a place where life turns to dust, where motion stills. But stone is never final. It is a middle state, a pause between becoming and becoming again. The carbon it holds may one day rise. Perhaps tectonic plates will lift this layer skyward, exposing ancient seabed to the air once more. Rain will fall on it, winds will wear it down, and in time the carbon will stir, drift, and rejoin the cycle. This is not a guess. It is a rhythm, slow but certain. Elsewhere, in places where stone has cracked and split, green things begin to grow. Moss creeps across granite. A small tree roots itself in a crevice. The leaf takes carbon from the air. Its roots break the rock further. Bit by bit, the stone softens, joins with soil, becomes part of a new living layer. In this way, even the hardest places are brought back into breath. Even the oldest carbon can return to the sky through the tiniest leaf. And when we build from stone, our homes, our monuments, our places of memory, we are, in a way, placing our lives within the carbon story. A building of marble may contain the breath of creatures older than us by millions of years. A tomb carved from limestone may hold more than history. It may carry the sky that touched a world before ours. We think of these structures as cold, but they are warm with time. They carry the legacy of oceans, of sunlight turned to shell. Even in our breath, carbon released today may come from food grown in soil rich with crumbled rock. The plants drew it in. We ate the plants. We breathe again. A carbon atom that once settled into a coral, locked in place, may now be part of your bloodstream, riding through your cells. Stone does not only hold the past, it gives to the present. It shares what it has stored when the time is right. And still some stone lies deep, untouched for ages, hidden beneath forests and cities. It waits not for release, but simply continues. Carbon stored in these depths is not idle. It is part of the balance. Its silence allows the rest of the world to move. It keeps the atmosphere lighter, the ocean calmer, the forests more able to grow. It is the unseen partner in every breath of air. But when we dig deep, when we pull from the crust the carbon held in oil and coal and gas, we awaken something that was meant to rest. We bring ancient breath too quickly into the sky. What took millennia to store is returned in years, and the earth struggles to rebalance. The carbon moves fast now, from fire to cloud to ocean to tree, faster than it can settle. The stone can only watch. Yet even now the earth works to heal. The rivers continue to weather the rock. The rain still falls with carbon from the sky. The sediments still gather in the depths. The breath is not broken, only shaken. With care, with time, with trust in the old rhythms, the stone can help again. It always has. In caves where no light reaches, stalactites grow by a fraction of a millimeter each year. Each drop of water carries carbon. Each mineral deposit is a marker of patience. In mountains that rise and fall, in cliffs that fracture and crumble, carbon is always shifting form, not by force but by the slow grace of change. And through it all, life adapts. Trees find foothold. Ferns unfurl. Lichens write their soft script across granite faces. This is the stone that carried a cloud that once drank carbon from the air, turned it into form, then rested. It did not shout. It did not bloom, but it held. And in its holding, it gave the world space to breathe, to grow, to live. Now close your eyes and feel the ground beneath you. Imagine the breath it carries, the story it keeps, the carbon it remembers. You are not separate from this. The same carbon that rests in stone may one day rise in you, in your breath, in your words, in your sleep. The cycle does not stop. It only turns. And in that turning, the stone speaks. Not in language, not in sound, but in form, in shape, in stillness. It tells us, I have held the sky, I have carried the breath, and I am waiting still. Deep within the earth, where pressure builds and heat pulses like a buried heart, carbon gathers in silence. It slips between cracks, bonds with minerals, rests in pockets of gas and molten rock. There it waits, not in sleep, but in tension. The mountain above, strong and still, carries this hidden breath, but it cannot hold it forever. One day the pressure tips, the silence breaks, and the mountain breathes ash. Volcanoes are Earth's exhalation. When they erupt, they release more than fire and stone. They release ancient carbon trapped for eons, born from the decay of forests, the bones of creatures, the sediments of long-lost seas. This carbon, once part of life, has been transformed by depth and time, sealed into rock or gas, waiting in magma chambers beneath the crust. When the mountain erupts, that carbon returns to the sky in smoke and ash, in steam and invisible gas. It is not a disaster alone, it is a cycle unfolding. Long ago, before cities, before fields, volcanoes were among the planet's main storytellers of carbon. Their breath shaped the early atmosphere, warming the world after long winters of ice, feeding plants with the very carbon they would later return. They were creators and destroyers, their ash fields both devastation and renewal. And still today, they continue, not often, not everywhere, but always eventually. When a volcano erupts, the ash it casts into the air carries with it tiny particles of carbon, mixed with minerals and the broken memory of stone. The sky darkens, temperatures fall, and yet beneath the ash, the soil is being reborn. Volcanic ash is rich with nutrients, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium. These feed the land. They make fields more fertile, forests more lush. The very carbon exhaled in eruption begins slowly to find its way back into roots and leaves. In this way, even destruction becomes a form of giving. The mountain's violent breath scatters the pieces that life will gather again. After the fire and the fall, after the smoke and silence, green returns. Ferns are often the first, then moss, then trees with seeds small and daring. They find purchase in the cracks of cooling lava, in the dust of ashfall. Their roots reach deep, their leaves lift up, and they begin to inhale the carbon once released. Some carbon returns to the sky forever, floating through the atmosphere, circling the planet. But some, caught in rain, falls back to Earth. It seeps into lakes, into soil, into streams. From there it enters the food chain again, into algae, into insects, into the fur of animals that graze on new grass growing from ash-covered slopes. The breath of the volcano becomes part of bodies once more. The mountain, now quiet, holds the memory of its exhale in layers. Each eruption leaves behind stone, basalt, obsidian, pumice, each with its own story of heat and gas, of carbon moved from deep to high. These rocks slowly weather. Rain breaks them down. Wind carries their dust. And so, long after the eruption has faded from memory, the carbon continues to move. The breath echoes. Even deep beneath dormant volcanoes, carbon continues its quiet journey. It flows in hydrothermal vents, escapes through fumaroles, seeps into groundwater. It moves invisibly, but never without purpose. It joins with minerals, forms new compounds, sometimes builds new life, strange microbial colonies that thrive in heat and acid, feeding on carbon where no light ever reaches. These life forms are reminders that carbon's story is not only above ground, not only green or blue. It is red, black, silver, molten. It is everywhere. Volcanoes also shape the sky. Their carbon changes the air. After a massive eruption, the world's temperatures may shift. Sunlight is filtered through ash. But over time, the carbon dioxide they release adds warmth, balances cooling, keeps the planet within the bounds life requires. This balance is delicate but natural. It has unfolded over millions of years. Only when disrupted by sudden excess, from fossil fuels, from deforestation, does the balance shake. The volcano, in comparison, is a gentle exhale. Even when fierce, it is expected, known. And for those who live near volcanoes, the cycle is familiar. They know the risk but also the reward. Crops grow richly in volcanic soil. Forests rise fast. Rivers fed by snowmelt from volcano flanks run clean and strong. The mountain gives even after it has burned. Its breath, though hot and sudden, feeds the roots of the next forest. The carbon it returns does not drift away alone. It returns with promise. So the mountain, still and massive, becomes something else in our understanding, not just a place of danger but of cycle. A monument of deep time whose breath connects the core of the earth to the clouds above. Its ash darkens the sky, yes, but that darkness is temporary. In the end, the carbon falls again, and the work of life begins anew. Let us now walk along the cooling fields of ash, where silence follows the storm, and something soft begins again. The ground, once scorched and cracked, begins to hold moisture. Wind no longer screams but whispers, scattering fine volcanic dust across the land. It is here, among the gray, that carbon begins to find its footing again. Not in the flames, not in the roar of eruption, but in the hush that follows, in the tender green that dares to emerge from blackened earth. The ash itself, though born in violence, is full of life's potential. It holds elements drawn from deep within the earth: magnesium, iron, calcium, phosphorus, each one essential to the building of roots, stems, and seeds. The carbon released in eruption may drift for weeks on high winds, but the minerals fall quickly, layering the ground like fine flour. Rain binds it, time tempers it, and soon the ash becomes soil. Into this new earth spores settle. Ferns, light and ancient, unfurl in the breeze. Their leaves reach upward, drawing down carbon from the sky just as they have for hundreds of millions of years. They do not question the ash, they grow through it. Their roots stretch downward, anchoring in the fragile ground. Each leaf, each breath begins to gather what the mountain exhaled. Slowly, steadily, carbon returns to form. Animals follow. First, the smallest insects, beetles, ants. They bring with them movement, waste, and the beginnings of new food webs. Birds arrive, drawn by seeds and silence. Their droppings carry nutrients, even more carbon, scattered across the land. The forest, though still a dream, begins to take shape in these quiet first acts. And the carbon, once scattered in fire, becomes again a part of bodies, of nests, of song. Lava flows, once molten and fierce, now lie still. Cracked and pitted, they seem lifeless. But lichens find purchase in the tiniest of grooves. These quiet colonizers begin to eat the stone not with teeth but with acids and time. They extract minerals, form soil from rock, and in the process sequester carbon themselves. The mountain's skin becomes alive again, and the slow dance of transformation continues. Within the volcanic soil, bacteria thrive. Some fix nitrogen, turning inert gases into food for roots. Others decompose what little organic matter arrives, releasing carbon back into the air but also making nutrients available for life. The soil becomes a community. Each interaction, each decay, each bloom is part of a cycle larger than itself. And through it all, carbon flows from sky to cell to soil and back again. As shrubs begin to grow and later trees, the forest that burned returns, not identical but reborn. The species may differ, the spacing may change, but the function remains. Trees rise, pull carbon from the air and store it in wood, in bark, in root. They do not remember the fire in fear but in adaptation. Their bark thickens. Their cones require heat to open. Their seeds lie dormant until ash awakens them. Even destruction in the forest's rhythm becomes a signal to grow. Over time, the landscape transforms. What was once ashfield becomes meadow. What was meadow becomes woodland. What was woodland becomes dense forest once again. The carbon held in branches today was once gas in a distant sky, once ash falling gently on cooling stone. Now it is leaf, it is limb, it is the cool breath beneath a canopy. The mountain's exhale has become shade. And still, beneath the soil, the story continues. Some carbon sinks deeper. It becomes part of the microbial soup, enters fungal networks, moves from root to root. It may stay for decades, for centuries. It may rise again in a mushroom or settle further into the mineral world. Some of it is transformed into stable compounds of biochar-like structures that resist decay. These become the mountain's long breath, exhaled in fire, now stored in stillness. Clouds above the mountain begin to shift. Trees transpire, sending moisture upward. The land cools, drawing in fog. Precipitation increases. The landscape, once dry from flame, becomes a cradle for new water cycles. And with each rainfall, more carbon is carried into rivers, into lakes, into the ocean beyond. There, it may feed algae, coral, or sink into sediment. Even from the high slopes of volcanoes, carbon flows to sea. This connection from fire to forest, from ash to ocean, is the great thread of Earth's breath. Volcanoes, though dramatic, are not outliers. They are part of a balance, a reset, a deep memory of the planet. Each eruption is followed by recovery, by regrowth, by the long return of carbon to life. And in this they resemble us. For even in our most broken moments, renewal is possible. The mountain teaches this without words. So when we see smoke on a distant horizon, we might look not only with worry but with understanding. The ash is not only an end, it is a beginning. It is the breath of the earth made visible. And what follows, the return of green, the quiet growth, the steady drawdown of carbon, is as much part of the story as the flame. Even now, around the base of volcanoes long dormant, forests thrive. Their roots drink from mineral-rich soil. Their trunks hold the sky. Their leaves shimmer with breath returned. And beneath them, in the cooled veins of the earth, carbon waits once more for fire, for growth, for flight. Let us return now to the mountain's quiet, not the moment of eruption, not the smoky aftermath, but the long years that follow. The years when the volcano stands watchful and still, its flanks green with new growth, its soil rich with stories. These are the years when breath settles, when carbon, once scattered to the sky in flame and fury, finds its way back home, into trunks, into streams, into seeds waiting patiently beneath the soil. Beneath the surface, the mountain still stirs, gases shift, water boils far below. But above, life gathers. Trees stretch tall, pulling carbon from the air one slow breath at a time. Leaves flutter against cooled lava. Their shadows fall across fields of wildflowers nourished by ash. The roots of these plants grip rock that once flowed like fire. And in every cell, carbon rests again, no longer a plume in the sky, but a molecule in green, in fruit, in breath. Animals return to this reborn slope. Deer graze in meadows once buried in soot. Birds nest in hollows carved by ancient blasts. Even bears find rest in forests born from ash. Their bodies are built from the plants they eat, from the carbon held in berries, in grasses, in leaves. The breath of the volcano, once fierce and far-flung, now moves through the lungs of life, softly, steadily, unnoticed. Farther down the slopes, rivers carry this carbon still. Leaves fall, soil washes. Dissolved carbon drifts with snowmelt winding through valleys, entering wetlands and lakes. Some of it is caught in algae, spun into life again. Some settles into mud to sleep for centuries. Some reaches the sea. There it may feed plankton, build shells, drift downward to join the long carbon snowfall that feeds the deep. The volcano's breath, once released, never truly ends. It simply keeps moving. And still the mountain holds more. Not all carbon escaped with the eruption. Much remained trapped in rock, in cooled magma and the pores of pumice stones. Over time, these will weather. Rain and frost will crack them. Roots will pry them apart. Slowly, they will release what they contain, not in bursts but in whispers. The carbon will rise again, but it will do so gently, folded into cycles that nourish more than they warm. Humans, too, live among volcanoes. Entire cultures have grown on these fertile slopes. Crops thrive in the nutrient-rich soil. Vineyards stretch across volcanic hillsides. Rice paddies shimmer in valleys fed by volcanic springs. We have learned to live with the risk, not by erasing it, but by honoring the gift. The carbon that enriches our food, that builds our homes, that fuels our fires, often began in a mountain's breath. Yet our own breath, our industries and fires have changed the balance. We release carbon far faster than volcanoes ever did, not over centuries, but in decades, in days. And the earth, resilient though it is, cannot draw it all back in. The forests planted after eruption are not enough to balance the forests we fell. The carbon sequestered in new soils is overwhelmed by what we dig and burn. The ancient rhythm strains. And still the mountain reminds us recovery is possible. After fire, life returns. After ash, green rises. The earth knows how to rebuild, but it needs time, it needs space. It needs the slowness we have forgotten. Carbon was never meant to rush. It was meant to cycle, to move from air to leaf to root, to rest in stone, to sleep in sea, to return in time. The mountain breathes in centuries, not minutes. There is wisdom in slowing down, in planting trees not just for shade but for memory, in restoring the wetlands that cradle carbon, in letting old forests grow older. The same carbon that once erupted from a volcano may now sleep in a mangrove root. The same breath that blackened the sky may now glow in a firefly's wing. Nothing is truly lost. Everything is becoming. The volcano, though quiet, watches. It holds no anger, only history. Its slopes speak in lichen and moss, in pine and fern. Its rivers run with breath caught and carried. And above it all, the clouds gather, shaped in part by the trees below, the moisture they send upward, the carbon they draw down. It is a loop, ancient and unbroken, unless we forget it. So let us remember. Let us walk the ash fields and know they are not barren. Let us feel the stone and know it once flowed. Let us breathe and know the carbon within us may once have spun through fire and will one day root again. The mountain breathes still, not in violence but in green, not in fear but in cycles. Its ash, once a warning, becomes a promise, that from even the hottest fire life returns, that breath finds its way home. And in that knowing, we, too, may learn to exhale not with haste but with care, to release only what the earth can hold, to trust the rhythm written in stone, in tree, in ash. The mountain does not forget, and neither should we. The story of carbon has always been a story of movement, from sky to soil, from breath to bark, from fire to stone. But once, in a moment quiet and strange, carbon leapt even farther. It left the forests and oceans behind. It soared beyond the atmosphere, carried not by wind or wing, but by fire harnessed into engines. When humans stepped onto the moon, they did not go alone. They took with them air, water, and food. And in each of those, woven quietly, was carbon, the same ancient molecule that once drifted through ferns, once rested in roots, once exhaled from the lungs of wolves. The moon, cold and silent, received the earth's breath. It began not with a rocket, but with a plant. Long before Apollo, carbon reached for the stars in the form of photosynthesis, the quiet miracle that turned sunlight into sugar. The carbon drawn into chloroplasts became food, became fuel, became bodies that dreamed. And when the time came to build machines, to calculate trajectories, to imagine flight beyond air, it was that carbon, harvested in grain and fruit, stored in bone and brain, that made it possible. Every thought, every invention, every moment of motion came from a chain of breath. The fuel that launched the first rockets was not just chemical, it was biological. It came from ancient carbon stored in fossil fuels, carbon that had been locked in the earth for millions of years. When released, it roared into flame, lifted steel into sky, and pushed human presence beyond the blue. With it went more carbon in the exhalations of astronauts, in the plastic of equipment, in the pages of manuals, in the thread of spacesuits. The moon, once untouched, now held traces of Earth's cycle. And when the astronauts landed, they carried more than tools. They brought footprints, yes, but also breath. Their respiration, though filtered and sealed, left behind traces of carbon dioxide. It mingled with the dust, subtle and weightless. The moon, which had never known atmosphere, now carried a whisper of it. The roots of our biosphere, so deeply tied to soil and water, had stretched farther than ever imagined. Not in form, but in influence. Not in branches, but in touch. Samples returned from the moon were studied with care. But even more profound was the realization that Earth's story could travel, that carbon, the element of life, was not confined to one world. It could be moved, carried, used elsewhere. In that moment, the boundaries of the carbon cycle widened. They now included machines and memory, dust and orbit, silence and curiosity. And back on Earth, in laboratories and greenhouses, experiments unfolded. Could plants grow in space? Could roots find purchase without gravity? Could carbon flow where air did not? And they found, yes, with care, with light, with nutrients, photosynthesis could continue. In orbiting stations, astronauts tended small gardens. Lettuce grew in pouches. Zinnias bloomed in plastic trays. The carbon exhaled by humans fed the plants. The oxygen released by leaves fed the humans. A closed loop like Earth, but smaller, delicate, a rehearsal of possibility. These floating ecosystems echoed the planet's own balance. Though tiny, they held within them the same rules: carbon in, carbon out, storage, transformation, release. A tomato grown in microgravity carried carbon drawn from a sigh. A bite of that fruit returned the molecule again. The roots had reached, not through soil, but through distance. They had found a way to continue their work, even among stars. And still the moon waited, barren, bright, and breathless, but not untouched. The tools left behind, the bootprints, the flags and experiments, all carried carbon. Even the discarded stages of rockets, scattered on the surface or left in orbit, held the molecule that ties us to trees, to tides, to time. The moon, in its silence, had become part of the cycle, a resting place for carbon that began in fern and fire. One day we may return there with more than flags. We may bring soil, seeds, water recycled from breath. We may build greenhouses beneath domes of glass or metal. And inside, carbon will flow again from root to stem, from leaf to lung, from exhale to fruit. The moon may host forests one day, not wild, not sprawling, but green. And in that green, carbon will move as it always has, softly, rhythmically, endlessly. And with every new cycle begun beyond Earth, we are reminded of the original, the one that still hums in forests, in oceans, in fields at dusk. The moon may host our experiments, our dreams, but the Earth remains the teacher, the planet where carbon first danced in light, the place where breath began. Let us float now into the soft orbit of thought, where Earth turns below and carbon continues its quiet journey, even in the absence of gravity. Outside the cradle of atmosphere, life becomes delicate. And yet, even here, carbon finds its rhythm, pulsing through capsules, whispered in breath, stored in machines designed to mimic what the forest once did without thinking. The roots that reached the moon were not literal, but they carried the same intention, to find a place where carbon could move, grow, and return. Inside the International Space Station, carbon is carefully managed, not just to protect astronauts but to replicate balance. Carbon dioxide exhaled by humans is scrubbed from the air by machines, some of which recycle it into water or even oxygen again. In small hydroponic gardens, green leaves rise beneath artificial sun, and the carbon from a human sigh is taken in, spun into sugar, turned into something tangible. A stem, a leaf, a bite of spinach. The loop is tight, but recognizable. It mirrors the cycle of Earth on a much smaller scale. Each of these tiny greenhouses becomes a breath engine, a microclimate where photosynthesis pulses gently, even as stars pass beyond the window. The plants, though unaware, are ambassadors. They carry the processes of Earth into space, transforming cabins into miniature ecosystems. The roots, cradled in liquid nutrient baths, seek not soil but stability. Their growth bends not down but outward, guided by light and flow. Still, the chemistry remains the same. Carbon is drawn in, converted, stored. This is the future of carbon, not a departure from nature but an echo of it. We do not escape the cycle, we bring it with us. Every astronaut who eats a salad grown in orbit partakes in a dance older than language. The carbon in their food may have come from their own exhalation, returned to them in a green gift. And when their breath releases it again, the cycle closes gently. Even far from Earth, the rules remain. Beyond orbit, missions to the Moon and Mars are imagined not just with engines and metal, but with carbon in mind. How will we breathe? How will we eat? How will we grow what we cannot carry? The answer circles back again and again: photosynthesis, the soft power of leaves, the patience of roots. Engineers and biologists collaborate now, designing systems where carbon is reused, where nothing is wasted, where breath becomes food, becomes breath again. In these ideas, there is a strange beauty, not because they are new, but because they are old truths reimagined. The same carbon that once floated through a trilobite's gill or darkened the bark of an old pine now loops in stainless steel cylinders, in sunlit pods aboard spacecraft. It never lost its purpose. We simply learned how to bring it along. The moon, with its dust and silence, offers more than just a destination. It offers reflection. When we leave behind footprints and fragments, we are also leaving echoes of Earth's breath. The food wrappers, the tools, the tiny fragments of skin or water all contain carbon once gathered from sunlight and air. They are reminders that we do not arrive alone. Every step taken across lunar plains is taken by a body built from Earth's fields. And in the future, if we grow gardens there, under domes or within regolith-shielded rooms, they will hold more than life. They will hold continuity. A lettuce leaf grown on the moon will carry carbon drawn from tanks filled with exhaled breath. The roots will feed on water purified from sweat. The loop will continue, strange but familiar, fragile but whole. Even the machines we designed to mimic photosynthesis, artificial leaves, carbon capture devices, are extensions of this same story. They do not replace nature but borrow its logic. They inhale the same molecule, apply different chemistry, seek the same result: transformation, storage, return. They are our attempt to hold the balance we once disrupted. And if placed one day on the moon, they will carry not only carbon but intention, a will to repair, to adapt. On Earth, meanwhile, the forests continue. Leaves unfold, roots drink. The cycle hums without the need for machines, but it also strains. The carbon we have released from engines, fires, and fields rises faster than the trees can draw it back. And so we look both forward and inward. We build gardens in orbit and replant forests at home. We design closed systems for distant moons and rewild valleys here. In every act, we honor the same need: to let carbon move with care. The story is not of escape, it is of extension. The roots that reach the moon are not trying to flee the Earth. They are carrying its wisdom outward. They say, this is how balance works. This is how breath becomes form. And even in darkness, even in silence, it can begin again. So as astronauts gaze out over the lunar surface, their own breath fogging inside helmets, they carry within them not only memory but presence. Their bodies are built from wheat grown in sunlit fields. Their cells hold carbon that once moved through rivers, through birds, through forest fires and spring blossoms. They are not separate from the planet they left. They are a piece of its breath, wandering. And somewhere far below on Earth, a child plants a seed. The soil is dark and soft. The sun is warm. The air is filled with invisible carbon. The seed waits, and then it begins. Now imagine this seed, tucked quietly in soil, beginning its reach toward the sun. It does not know that somewhere above the sky, orbiting softly through space, its distant cousins grow under artificial light. It does not know that its carbon-bound journey mirrors a path traced by machines and breath on the moon. But still, it reaches. Its roots press downward into earth, into ancient soil filled with stories. And its leaves unfurl upward, catching carbon that drifts invisibly in the morning air. In this small act, unnoticed by the world, the cycle continues. The seed becomes stem, the stem becomes leaf, and the carbon taken from the sky is stored again in green. This same carbon may have been released from a volcano, passed through a whale, drifted in the upper atmosphere, rested in charcoal, or flowed through the roots of prairie grass. Now it lives in the body of a sprouting plant, gathering light, exhaling oxygen, growing slowly in the quiet rhythm of life. This is the power of the earth. It does not stop. It reuses, reimagines, renews. Some of that carbon may be eaten by a rabbit, by a human, by a beetle. It enters new bodies, is spun into muscle, into thought, into breath. The story continues, endlessly branching, reaching from one form into another. And someday it may rise again, released in sleep, in fire and sigh. The earth receives it and begins again. Even if it drifts into the sky, even if it escapes to space, it is not lost. It is simply moving as it always has. The moon, circling far above, carries its own share of these carbon echoes. A space glove tucked under a lunar rover. A canister of dust sealed with forgotten breath. A machine etched with fingerprints, touched by sunlight, cooled by shadow. These artifacts rest where there is no wind, no rain, no decay. And in each, carbon waits unchanged, unmoved, silent. It holds the memory of the world it came from. The carbon of coffee sipped before liftoff. The carbon of a leaf eaten years ago, long digested, now fused in polymer and plastic. And perhaps one day those tools will be touched again. Humans will return, walking once more on the moon's pale plains. They may find old machines, pick up the remnants of the past, and feel in metal and dust a thread of something familiar. That sense will not come from shape or design, but from what remains hidden, the carbon. It ties the past to the present, the earth to the moon, the soil to the sky. It connects every journey. Even further ahead, we may carry seeds to other planets, Mars perhaps, or moons of Saturn. We may bring soil, light, water, carbon-rich air. And in glass domes or underground chambers, life may begin again. The first sprout in Martian dust, drawing carbon from a chamber's recycled breath, will be an echo of the same process that unfolded on Earth billions of years ago. Different world, same story. The roots will stretch, the leaves will reach, carbon will move. But no matter how far we go, we will always be tied to this beginning, to the forests that first filled the sky with oxygen, to the oceans that held carbon in drifting shells, to the roots that, long ago, lifted themselves towards sunlight and made breath from light. The moon may be our mirror, but Earth is our source. Every cycle we recreate out there is a reflection of what Earth does effortlessly, a dance of air and root and molecule. Even now, as satellites circle, as rovers climb dusty slopes, as astronauts float through quiet chambers, Earth continues its breath, trees sway, soil shifts, fungi bloom in the dark. Carbon, always carbon, moves with perfect patience. Some drifts into leaves, some settles into stone, some becomes part of your very breath as you read these words. The cycle, invisible and immense, carries all of us. And so the roots that reached the moon were not made of wood or fiber. They were made of carbon. They were built from decisions and discoveries, from meals and memories, from fuels and forest walks. They stretched not through soil, but through effort, intention, time. And they carry with them the same promise, that life can grow, that breath can travel, that balance, though fragile, is never truly lost. When we return to Earth, when rockets fall silent and boots touch ground, the trees are still there. The forests breathe without noise. The rivers carry carbon down to the sea, and in this quiet persistence there is comfort. We are not separate from the cycles we study. We are participants. We breathe with the trees. We plant the seeds. We carry the stories. One day, long after today is forgotten, a molecule of carbon released in laughter may rise into the sky, settle on a leaf, drift into a current, or sleep inside the bark of a tree that never knew your name. But it will remember your breath. It will remember movement. And somewhere, perhaps on a mountaintop or in a garden beneath another sun, it will begin again. This is the legacy of carbon. This is the shape of connection. From root to star, from side to stone, from the earth to the moon and back again, a story without end, a breath that never stops. Now that the stories have been told, the cycles traced, the breath followed from soil to sky, from root to moon, let us rest with the fullness of the journey. These were not just tales of science. They were lullabies of motion, of molecules that drift without end, of life that remakes itself not once, but again and again. Carbon, the silent storyteller, has shown us its many shapes. The hush beneath the soil, the shimmer of green in a trembling leaf, the weight of stone, the dance of fire, the silence of ash, the whisper of oceans, and the long reach of a seed planted in space. Each story was different, yet none stood alone, for carbon never travels in isolation. It is always part of a relationship with light, with time, with breath, with memory. And through its movement we glimpse something deeper, the truth that we are not separate from the earth but written into its rhythms. Our bones are built from ancient breath. Our thoughts are sparked by sunlight caught in fruit. Our every exhale is an offering, returned to the trees, the seas, the soil. And the earth receives us gently. It does not rush our return. It simply continues, patient and steady. Whether we drift beneath forests or float above lunar plains, we are always part of the same soft process, dissolving, reforming, beginning again. Life does not shout its cycles. It hums them, like roots threading through loam, like snow settling into lake, like light passing through chlorophyll, unnoticed but essential. Perhaps the deepest comfort lies here, that no breath is wasted, no fall is final. Carbon assures us even in loss there is continuity. Even in stillness, motion remains. The tree that falls becomes the sprout. The fire that consumes becomes the soil. The sky we breathe today was once held in the lungs of whales, in the hands of leaves, in the quiet curl of a fern. And the breath you offer now, even this moment, will be carried onward into something else, into someone else. So close your eyes, not to forget but to feel. The world continues around you, within you. The carbon in your chest may one day bloom. The carbon in your sleep may rise in steam, in wind, in whisper. And as it does, it will remember. It was once part of a body that paused to listen. That found beauty in balance. That honored the quiet science of life. There is nothing more to add, only to breathe. Let the cycle continue gently without end. Far beneath the noise of cities, beneath the buzz of machines and the urgency of days, there moves a rhythm softer than sound. It is the breath of the planet, carbon passing quietly from one form to another, unbroken, unafraid. You cannot see it, but it is always near. In your breath, your food, the soil beneath your feet. In the bark of trees, the bones of birds, the echo of laughter drifting into evening air. It is in every touch, every motion, every stillness. Imagine now a quiet grove where no one speaks. Only wind moves through branches and the trees sway gently, carrying stories you cannot hear but can almost feel. Their trunks are heavy with years, their roots tangled with memory. Here the carbon is not rushing, it is resting. A molecule once held in a sunbeam now sleeps in a ring of wood, wrapped in silence. This is not decay, it is continuation. Elsewhere a river winds through mountains. Along its banks, mosses drink the mist and leaves from last season curl in the eddies. Every drop of water carries a trace of carbon from rain, from breath, from soil long ago loosened by the footsteps of deer. The stream does not think of time. It moves forward and in doing so brings the past with it. This is the work of the earth, gentle, slow, unending. Now drift outward again beyond the clouds where satellites trace the planet's curve like silent sentinels. They carry tools and wires, but within those machines are carbon atoms, forged in factories, shaped by minds, powered by fuel. Even the data we send through space rides on wires made from the breath of forests, the heat of ancient soils. Nothing is untouched by this cycle, not even the farthest signal. In some distant laboratory, a seed is tested, dried, frozen, stored for the long future. Perhaps one day it will be carried beyond Earth to grow in red dust or under a different sky. And if it does, its first breath will be the same as its ancestors, pulling carbon from air, turning light into life. Even there, it will not forget its origin. It will stretch upward, root downward, and begin the cycle anew. As if to say, we remember. And so the story does not end here. It circles gently, waiting for the next breath, the next leaf, the next hand to place a seed into waiting soil. The science is simple, the poetry endless, for in the quiet places of the world and in the quiet corners of ourselves, carbon continues its sacred pattern, becoming, returning, beginning again. Now everything is quiet. The stories have been told, the breath has passed gently through oceans, roots, stone, and ash. The journey has stretched from the hum of soil to the silence of stars, and now it returns not to a beginning but to a center, a pause, a soft inhale before the next cycle begins. You are not at the end. You are simply here, resting, breathing, part of something vast and slow. Around you, the world continues its gentle turn. Trees sway without hurry. Fungi thread their lace beneath the forest floor. Rivers carry the memory of mountains in every ripple. And far above, the clouds still carry the echo of leaves that once breathed upward. You are surrounded by this rhythm, shaped by it, carried within it, not as a visitor but as a participant. You have always been inside the breath. The carbon within you, in your bones, your voice, your dreams, has lived many lives. It may have once flowed through a fern that bent in ancient wind. It may have floated in the belly of a whale, nestled in the coal of an old fire, drifted in mist across a sleeping lake. It has circled through time, never lost, never still. And now it rests here, inside you, breathing with the world. Outside, the night deepens. The stars glimmer not as distant things, but as reflections, reminders that carbon was born in their hearts, scattered in their light, gathered here in your chest. The breath you hold is stardust remembered. It carries not only science, but silence. Not only molecules, but meaning. So close your eyes if they are not closed already. Let the breath slow. Let the cycle cradle you. There is nothing more to hold. You have already returned, not to a place but to an understanding that everything is connected, that every form is temporary, that every molecule is a memory becoming something new. The earth turns, the carbon flows, and you rest within it all.